what if they knew what they didn't know?
The biggest thing that a person has to do is understand, well, what it is that I want to do, for one thing, and then is it actually feasible? And is it feasible where I want to do it?
It's kind of a circular process.
At the very front end of a project, it's asking yourself, what is it am I doing? What's my goal? And how do I get there?
It's going to be dependent upon advice from the professional.
I don't want to put the cart before the horse, I guess, because that's all really good information. So this is like the first DREAM BuildCast, right? I know we've been talking a lot about lots of different things in the early stages of the project. I mean, obviously, Alex, development and architecture and plan review and code. And I mean, there's probably so many other things. I mean, you're doing the pretty much full process. I saw your LinkedIn. That's they did 3 weeks ago. That and then Devon, I know you had commented on it, so you seen it as well. Like, obviously you're in that, so you're doing great. Devon, obviously, I mean, you've been doing actually a lot more construction management than actual structural engineering, correct?
Doing a bit more. That's where a lot of the industry, we make most of the money from the industry, the construction management piece. The engineering piece still takes up a lot of time. It's just that you, from a income perspective, the CM piece is a bit more efficient.
What do you mean by that?
You see, with engineering, with a design piece, you have the number of billable hours tend not to be directly related to the amount of time you spend. With the CM part, you tend to be able to bill for quite almost all the actual hours you spend on the work.
Okay. But you also talk about the difference between architecture and construction engineering.
Well, at least that's from the business side.
No, I get that. It's like one-to-one versus like figure it out versus I gotta be outside.
That is correct. With design, it involves a number of other components that might not be directly billable to your client. With a CM piece or owner's rep piece, which is where I spend most of the time, you find that your number of billable hours are close to the number of hours you actually spend on the project.
Okay, awesome. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse, I guess, because that's all really good information. How about we backtrack? So the reason why I originally had this idea of like, okay, I want to do some sort of video or podcast, because Milwaukee is a place where I just, a lot of times hire by individuals that are already doing it. They're trying to do construction already, right? They haven't called you, Alex. They haven't called you, Devon. And they're literally like, they're doing it because they have the ability to go buy materials, right? They have the building. They generally know what they want to do, right? Generally know. And so I am those persuasion where I do not want to hinder someone's stride. I want to help them, right? I don't want to break it. So my thought is, what if they knew what they didn't know before they started, So how can we produce, information for people so that they can readily grab those pieces of information in real time? And only the information that's applicable to them. So if it's a daycare, hey, what are the things that are applicable to me when I'm actually looking for a lease space, before I get sign a lease, so that I don't even run into the plan issues, run into the fire separation issues, but this, but that, So that's kind of been my thought as far as how do we, produce something around that, so that people can have ultimately a platform to get information. So I guess the first thing that maybe I want to pro is more so, Alex, you're on the development side, right? And you've been on the plan review side. So you've been on literally like kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum, right? Right before they get to where, obviously you're working with them on the engineering side. So that's during that, in between the process. But obviously you're talking about the construction management side as well, where you're permitted already. You should know exactly what's happening, but all your sins will be revealed. in the construction process, right? As far as what you get to figure out in advance. How do you see development in that regard of saying, hey, these are the things that are really important. And if you screw this up, you're going to be screwed for the rest of the project.
Well, approaching development and doing building projects is one of those very intimate processes, depending on what the client or the person is doing. And it really depends on like the approach that you have to a project. And so the biggest thing that a person has to do is understand, well, what it is that I want to do, for one thing. And then is it actually feasible? And is it feasible where I want to do it? I mean, it's kind of like, oh, I want to open a restaurant. I had a conversation a long time ago with an individual, and he's like, I want to open a restaurant. I just wanted a space where I can do this, serve people and just eat and make breakfast. Well, have you ever been in a restaurant? Have you ever done that sort of thing? What's your training? What type of restaurant do you want to have? What are your hours going to be? How much is it going to cost? Is it in a place? How are you going to advertise? How much space do you have or do you want? All those things are very, you need to understand what those things are, how much I'm going to charge for whatever I'm making. Well, how do I determine those things? And so, but the general question is, well, I just thought I'd do a restaurant. I thought it'd be easy, flip some pancakes and, crack some eggs and it will be easy to do a restaurant. But restaurants that's probably one of the hardest businesses because probably over 50% of them fail within like the first year or something like that. And now you're stuck with the space, equipment, loans, if that's how a person did something. Now you're just stuck. And so for me, I think when I talk to individuals who have ideas or think about that they have ideas, they want to do something, you have to start counting the costs for what it is that you want to do and then start gathering the information to make it feasible. And so if we go back to the restaurant idea, so how big is the restaurant? Or how much is the space that you want to rent? Is it already a restaurant or do I have to actually build it out? So that's the next question. Now, if I have to build it out, well, what does that mean? Or what does that take? And what kind of equipment do I need in order to do that? And so now ball starts rolling in the things that you would need to do in order to get it done. And then, well, I have a time now, you have to start putting together a time frame in which you want to get things done and start thinking about the necessary professionals that you need in order to get it done. So, I
Right.
mean,
But even interestingly, doesn't the development it's kind of a circular process because or iterative process because basically you kind of the cost is going to be dependent upon especially with respect to the infrastructure. It's going to be dependent upon advice from the professional as well. So in other words, you taking a building that used to be a house and trying to convert it into a restaurant, you have a significantly more troublesome situation with respect to change of use than if you had an old restaurant. So all of these, the process might very well be iterative. In other words, you have to revisit your costs after you speak with a consultant, right?
that's right. Well, even before that, if I've never done a restaurant and I have the idea that I want to go do a restaurant, I, as a person with the idea, I should go talk to some people who own some restaurants. And my question is, have they done that or do they do that? Because if they did such thing, they probably just not even do it because it's so hard. And not that it's a detractor, but I think a lot of times people need to know what it actually takes to do something if you've never done it before. I was just listening to the radio the other day, and this woman calls in and says, I don't know what to do. We had a restaurant and it failed. The host goes, well, have you ever done a restaurant before? No. both me and my husband quit our job so we can run this restaurant. 4 months later, the restaurant's closed, hemorrhaging money. I mean, and so it's things like that where you're just like, well, duh, why wouldn't you just go ask someone about what it's like to run a restaurant business? In restaurant businesses, and then if you want a brick and mortar spot, knowing like how do you start off in the restaurant business? Well, get a food truck, get a food cart or something, first before prove your concept. Do some pop-up events at your church and do that before wanting to get a space. Because then the restaurant design is a whole nother level. Even so, if you want to have a 500 square foot restaurant, well, or you have a 500 square foot space, right? And you need are people going to dine in or is this carry out? I think now that we're past COVID and everything, how you approach restaurants is different than what you did before COVID, right? And so if I have a 500 square foot space, ask the question, is this a quick fire restaurant? Do people come in, do they sit and dine, or do they take it and go? One question, right? If they have a place for people to sit, well, how much space do you need for them to sit? And generally with the restaurant, if you have 500 square feet, half of it's going to be dedicated to the kitchen and the other half is going to be for customers. So now you're down to a 250 square foot dining area or entry, whatever you're going to be doing. And then the rest of it's going to be your kitchen uses and whatnot. So people don't know that kind of stuff. And then what kind of equipment are you going to do? Are you frying stuff? Are you just putting stuff in an oven? Then the biggest question is, well, I need a grill. Oh, that also means you need a hood. And you can't just put it anywhere. And if you don't have a hood, you got to try to put one in somewhere. And that's an expense. And so I don't think at the very front end of a project, it's asking yourself, what is it am I doing? What's my goal? And how do I get there? Yeah.
So it appears that in summary, if you haven't done one before, one had better at least go do some kind of exploration with respect to touching base with people who have done it before and or bringing consultants prior to making your final decision.
Right. But I think a lot of times people kind of jump into something and then start spending money and then realize, oh, I don't know what I'm doing.
I think that's that blind energy I think about when I run into clients and they haven't ran into Alex yet and they haven't even talked to you yet, Devon, right? And they're already at the point in which they're starting to build stuff, right? And, I work with a client that literally he builds faster than I can draw, So sometimes if there's a fire restoration, I might pop up to the site and the drywall might be done, but I don't know what happened behind it, So you don't even know if they've consulted the proper people and got the proper information. So what you guys are talking about is literally, this is exactly what I'm talking about. It's like the stuff you don't know. In my industry in architecture, I can't design anything I've never experienced. So I can totally relate to the whole concept of if you haven't done it before, you should go ask about it. You should do some research. I think some of those things that you're talking about, Alex, are actually not as unattainable as what people might think, right? Because people, you could probably ask for a manager at a restaurant that you're actually at, right? And get them to come out and talk to you at the table, right? Because you're spending money at the restaurant. You probably could have that conversation. Now, what will probably be harder is getting a structural engineer to give you advice on your project advance, correct? You'd have to what does a structural engineer look like, Do you carry around some type of special protractor or something in your front pocket?
Interestingly, it's been a while since I've looked at a protractor.
It's probably hard that worried a while.
It's actually been a while since I've seen one. But the reality is that oftentimes it makes sense for a prospective developer or owner for whatever the building use is going to be, touch base with the architect first so that the architect can provide some guidance as to where modifications have to be made, and because the structural engineer is probably useless to the prospective owner without I mean, if there are not going to be changes, or I mean, there are instances, for example, when there's a existing building where there might be questions about the structure's ability to be used for a specific kind of occupancy. But generally, the bigger issue is, what structural modifications are going to be required in order to allow for the changes that the architect is recommending. So in my mind, although many times it appears that bringing in these consultants is architects who are alleged to have these extremely high fees. The engineers are the cheap ones on the project. Although sometimes it would appear to a prospective developer that it's if they can limit the use of that consultant, then they might be saved. I think that's actually a false premise, because the reality is that the architect would most likely be able to provide them with guidance that cause them to not have to do too many iterations. They'd at least be steered in the right direction the first time. So that in my mind is typically the way, the most efficient way.
I would agree. I think, however, a lot of times those professionals aren't used, right? And that's where the problems start.
Absolutely.
When that happens, people say, oh, and I think part of the conversation Nick and I have had numerous amount of times is that the architect is just someone who does drawings. And that is just not the case.
Absolutely not.
That's our last product.
I recall that, I know architects do a lot more drafting than engineering, but I recall that being just the drafting part being just one course. Right. And you spend so many years training. Obviously, the drafting is a relatively small fraction of the overall training. So, yeah.
And I think that's where the disconnect comes.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you have a couple different types of individuals out there. You have the educated, knowledgeable person who knows, oh, I need to just go get someone to design my project for me, an architect, whoever it is. And then you have the other individuals out there, oh, I can just go do this and I'll just get some wood, nail something up, and I'm good. It's my property. I can do what I want with it. No one's going to tell me I can't.
Is that Texas?
Texas, Atlanta, Florida, wherever you may be. You're going to find those individuals anywhere. You'd be out in the country, like, who's going to tell me what I can and cannot do with my property? You have others out there who just don't know. They don't know what they don't know and just keep on going. And so with the term of an architect, well, what is an architect? I mean, it's a multifaceted person, and they do have to have a knowledge base of a lot of different things, and they are the conductor for the orchestra, I'll say, right? And then on the other end, you have like a developer, and then I never knew what a developer was. When I was growing up, I thought architects did that. They design all the stuff. But as you get into it and you start seeing, well, who really controls the project? It's either like a sole proprietor owner, an institution, right? Or it's a developer, and the developer takes capital from other people, investors, and they go build stuff. And so it's kind of like a twofold thing. The architect has a vision, but also a developer has a vision that's more economically based to go do something.
Are you saying that, so you're the one that actually develops that, like, literally, if you take the phrase or you use the word to define the word, you literally develop the project, meaning you pull it out the ground, right? You literally pull the idea, like you are the basis of the idea, but from a standpoint that you're going to make sure before you even start that it works, correct?
Oh, that is correct.
Okay.
Isn't it more accurate to say that the developer have to do the preliminary, feasibility study, kind of? They come up with the idea. The concept is theirs. However, they really don't know what the cost is until they get input from the professionals, meaning architects, engineers, and by engineers now I'm referring to all of the relevant engineering disciplines. The HVAC guys, the civil guys, the structural guys, because ultimately the project costs and the true feasibility study is going to be a function of all these costs associated with creating a facility that can be used for the function that that the developer conceives.
Right.
You think about the situation, the developer will see a site that's a nice looking site, but that site might very well have been used for a certain purpose before, and is probably zoned in a certain way currently that will require significant amount more capital outlay in order to get this thing developable, at least for the intended use, right? So it might be useful to point out that these processes are always kind of iterative.
Oh, they're very much so. Very much so. I was a perfect example. I'm looking at trying to do a project and had an initial concept and, called up a contractor friend of mine and just like, hey, what does it cost to do X, Y, and Z? This amount of units, this type of construction. Here's my idea. While that person's doing where the contractor is doing their thing, I'm putting some preliminary thoughts together in terms of, well, how does this cash flow? If it's 100 units with the planned type of construction, the rents are going to be at one thing, and then the construction costs or whatever they are. And then financing costs are going to be this, and taxes are going to be this other costs. I'm putting together my numbers to see what it's actually going to take to work. So when I get that number back from the contractor and say, oh, those construction costs are higher than what I thought. So now I put that back into my formula. I'm looking at, well, what our rents are going to be in the area. I'm like, oh, rents are at this number. That's a little bit lower than I want. Construction costs are a little bit higher than I want. The purchase price is okay. And now I start mixing it all together to try to figure out, well, is this a project I would actually want to do? And then trying to figure out at what level can I actually do the project? Because it turns out that the original concept doesn't work. I can't go do what I thought I could do on this project. I can't build underground parking. It's too expensive. So that means I can't get as many units. So that means now if I want to do a project on the site, well, I got to pare down the number of units and figure out what type of units work so that, and the sort of construction type, I can't have a 4-story building. I can probably do a 3-story building where I don't need an elevator. I don't need a parking garage, because now I can park all the cars on the lot without digging underground. And you start thinking things through that way. How does a project work? What does it make to look? What does it take to make the project work? And so you have to start asking yourself those questions. And then once you come to a spot where you have a potential project, now you start employing more people to start testing that theory, and the developer is spending. And so I think the developer will understand that you need to do an initial cash outlay in order to get the result that you're going to research the project. And then after that initial outlay, they come back and say, okay, we can proceed more and start really getting into real design, zoning, permitting, and all that kind of stuff. So I mean, it is phase. It is iterative. If you have some of those skills, you don't need to pay someone else to go do for you. If you don't have those skills, then you have to pay someone else to go do it for you.
Look, pretty cut and dry there. So I think, I mean, that's probably in my opinion, that's probably one of the biggest prohibitors, right, of people engaging all these professionals up front is the upfront cost, and they haven't made any money, right, based off of what they're actually trying to do. They want to open a restaurant to make money, right? I know we keep using the example of a restaurant. But like you said, it could be even small, but super complex, right? So they could, they need the capital. So I think maybe what I'm hearing here is, and this is going to kind of segue to you for a second, Devon, but then also you too, Alex, because you're seeing front end and back end, because they're cutting that cost up and because they're not spending those dollars up front. Now what? Maybe I'm directing that toward you, Devon. Like, you're in the construction management, like you're literally, you know what I'm saying? Like you might not have done any of the previous, right? And they just bring you in just for construction.
Right. So for most part, when the clients that use an owner's rep tend to have gone through and had design services done typically. However, you do have some of the rare cases where an individual would say, okay, we have a contractor, but I need somebody to come and help me just manage this contractor. And that is without having gone through and done all the due diligence associated with a specific project. Because and I think one big thing that needs to be understood is that projects, each project is unique, and by definition, that's why it is. A project has finite schedule, finite costs, and is unique. An owner might have felt, okay, we have done one before, therefore we don't need the consultants in the upfront. But what you find is that this site, let's take a simple project like Daycare, because in terms of concept, in conceiving it, that many people say that, oh, you just take a space and put some. The problem with daycares is that the code requirements tend to be a bit more onerous than many of the other uses. I'm stepping out of my lane a little bit here, Alex, because this is, but so you can slap me if I misspeak. But what you find with daycares is that in addition to, in the case of Milwaukee in particular, in addition to the fact that the zoning requirements are a bit more robust, and you have the code rules much more onerous, it causes quite a bit of problems, especially when an owner say, okay, but this building was, I bought this because it looks like a nice space for a daycare. It was used for an office before, so it was used for commercial purposes, not recognizing that you have a change of use, and therefore now you have to make all kinds of modifications to conform in order to get to meeting the code requirements. But now they have you on board to provide them with some guidance. The problem is that they previously got some quotes from a contractor who knows how to do the building itself, but doesn't necessarily recognize that, this building doesn't necessarily meet all the code requirements. And so often that's what many of these smaller individual developers do. They get a contractor to give them a price as to how to convert the building for a daycare use. I use the daycare use because that's the most common one, that where the developer is an individual, at least.
I would call that an operator.
Thank you very much, sir. Yeah, well,
Look at Alex. Not my job.
not the developers. It's an upper. But in this case, it's an operator developer, right? Or you prefer to just say operator and leave?
I would say operator and owner, because because essentially they are operating a business and they want their own space.
Right. Except that in this case, they also are the ones who have conceived the idea of using a space that wasn't used that way for a daycare. So, but I agree with you. Their process does not involve many of the activities that's normally associated with a developer. I am with you.
Now, you could have operators who are developers because they develop daycare centers. There are individuals out there who do that, and they know what they're doing.
Yep. I got one client. She's literally the area. She's already on like 4th, 5th one. Like, she'll just see the space. She knows the numbers. Because if you think about it, to Devon's point, they do have to run there like, okay, I can get these many kids, right? In this space, this is my revenue, right? So they are kind of, I would say, daycares, just from what I'm hearing you two say right now, daycares probably, those operators probably are the closest to doing what a developer does in order to start a business, because a restaurant, they're not going to be able to determine how much money they're going to make after they open, right? But a daycare can. And with the demand for a daycare, they're like, no, I'm going to be full, they're pretty confident.
Right. So when they, in order to determine their costs, typically what they do is that they grab a contractor first and say, how much is it going to take to modify this building? And then the contractor provides them with a price. And then they get the consultants in, and then the consultants explain to them, no, it's a lot more than that, because the codes dictate substantially more changes, more modifications than you anticipate. Mm-hmm. And then they, it becomes a little bit uncomfortable for all parties as a result. So
that's a nice way to put it, Devon. Real uncomfortable. They realize they're screwed.
Yeah. So I think the theme here, at least from my perspective, and this viewpoint that has become clearer each year that I practice, is it pays. It just benefits an owner, a developer, to have the appropriate consultants in prior to getting too far into a project. It just makes a lot more sense. I know that intuitively it might appear a little bit more expensive, but in the long run, it definitely works out better.
That's you. You guys got me thinking of an idea right now, which I'm going to make them edit this out because we're not giving this out for free. But we should host workshops at various times where we're actually physically there. People can come in with their daycare projects, and we go, hey, we're going to spend an hour giving you general information, and then we'll take an hour, kind of walking around, everybody doing their math, right? And it's almost like a group thought type situation, where he's just like, because so many times I've called, daycare calls me, and before I even got phone, we like talking between you two, like so much over these past year, especially like, I'll say the past like 2 years, where like we've been messing with like certain plan reviewers and certain projects. It makes you really figure out what's important, right? Like for daycare, it's like, okay, what are you next to, right? Do you have 0 barrier entry? Do you have ADA bathroom, right? Like the boss said, was it a daycare prior? What are you changing it to? So I feel like if we almost provided that information up front and let them know that, hey, don't even select this space if it doesn't have these things. And if you have any, shotgun storefront spot with a front and the back door and a fire sprinkler, you almost are in the game, Like as long as you have an 88 bathroom, you're literally probably gonna have to do nothing, And that's what this one client that I know that's open multiple in the same location. She just she found a huge shopping complex basically, and they just keep giving her the same space over and over again. And they're already 1 hour fire separated because they had construction in the 2000s, right? So it's like there's nothing to talk about. She's changing carpet. But anywho, we can continue to segue. I'm just dropping ideas into this as you guys are like giving.
I have a few reservations about that, but and we those are things we can discuss in a bit more. The issue is you are right that if you bring individuals in with their specific projects, then then obviously you're giving guidance on a specific thing. But again, for me, when dealing with individual projects, any guidance, unless it's a case where you're going to be there on the site, actually being able to visit the site and see the specific circumstances, real time, providing the level of guidance you can provide is necessarily limited, because each situation is going to be so different, but so assuming the guidance is provided in a very general way, then concerns about liability and all of these little things probably get a bit less. But
Devon, you are definitely my what they call that, risk management. I call my wife my risk manager, but she'll be like, "Yeah, sounds like a great idea, Nick, but what about this?" And I'm like, "I didn't want to think about that yet."
I guess part of the issue is I spend too much time doing owner's rep stuff, so part of your responsibility there is to prevent your owner from getting into problems.
If you're actually, so technically speaking, who would they be talking to first, the owner's rep or the developer? Or is the developer talking to the owner's rep?
Well, the owner's rep typically works. That's kind of a special term given to someone that is an extension of the construction management arm of the owner. So basically, the owner might need additional people to supplement its construction management team. And that's how one gets to be an owner's rep. Or it could be a case where the owner doesn't feel fully capable of performing the management of the construction process. Okay. And so they bring in an owner's rep to do a high level look, supervision, management of the construction process.
Okay.
So what that means is that you spend a lot of time as an owner's rep ensuring that your client, the owner, does not end up in risky situations, or there is a very high likelihood of the project succeeding. When I use the term succeed as a project, we mean, as I mentioned before, each project has its own unique objectives with respect to cost, schedule, and quality. So success means achieving all of these objectives. When I use the term risk, I'm thinking about it in the context of anything that might derail success relative to quality or better, depending on the specific objectives of the owner, cost, schedule, and quality. The role each one of these play in that triangle is a function of specific project. But yeah, so when I talk about risk, that's what I'm referring to. Anything that could derail any of those three things.
Okay. So then I feel like I'm getting a not new, but I'm getting an interpretation of owner's rep services that has been now, I'll just say this. I thought the owner's rep could also act on behalf of the owner from the very beginning of a project because they don't even know that.
Yes.
Okay. So
yeah, that is a possibility. Although my experience is that because again, in some of the owner's rep projects that we have been involved, team members on the owner's rep team side have also been involved with the owner in the whole feasibility study part. So assisting them with some of the developers' roles, with respect to financing and all of these other things. That's a little bit outside my lane because I'm more on the technical side rather than the money side guys.
I got you. So look, let's segue to Alex then really quickly. And I know we are kind of coming up on our allotment of time that we allot for this morning. So let me know if we can go a few minutes over or not, or if we need to do a hard stop. But Alex, I guess I'll be able to provide some additional insight as far as owner rep services, as far as your interpretation of what you've experienced in your, I guess, specific areas, plural, of the industry.
Right. I think it really depends on I do have an experience on that. I would say that on the owner's representative side, it depends on the experience and knowledgeable in the experience of the group that is asking for the services. So if you are a not social service nonprofit or something where you are now embarking on a building campaign and you don't have that expertise or experience in that, you'd probably hire an owner's representative to assist in that process. And depending on the contract and whatever the representative experience is, there could be a breadth of services offered, from financial feasibility to construction management to all that, design management, to aid in that process. If you are a municipality, you may have a third-party management people come and manage the process for you. You as the municipality give input to that representative, and they do work. They report back to you with the options, make decisions off of their analysis. It could be something like that as well. So there are different ways in which those services are offered and rendered.
So that's actually consistent with what I was saying, but as usual, Alex is better capable of articulating it. So that's
Hey, the chicken or the egg, man. It's the chicken or the egg. Either way, either one's gonna get eaten. Okay.
Or, another key example is if I'm in a location and I want to do a project in Boise, Idaho, or something like that, and I have this piece of property, but I'm not going to be flying back every week to manage it. You hire a person on site locally to be a representative. It could be something like that. And what you see a lot too on a more corporate scale is, say, these huge property managers like JLL or CBRE, they'll be owners representatives for Chick-fil-A. They'll go and design, procure all the engineers, all the permitting, in all the sites for Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A will say, hey, we're going to be opening a few more restaurants in Illinois. And the Illinois shop of JLL will go to that site and manage the whole project, permitting for Chick-fil-A.
I
mean,
are they doing site selection as well?
Possibly.
So then that's what, marketing studies and all that kind of stuff?
Well, for example, they probably do their own marketing because they know. But once it comes, like say Chick-fil-A, so like once they figure out they're in, they'll say, hey, JLL, you go procure this site, go make sure it's designed correctly. So if you need to use local architects, go hire those folks and give them our spec for our design. Go through the zoning process, get it permitted, hire the contractors, build it. And then at the end of the process, we want this turnkey building. I mean, that's an owner's representative. That's what they do in the retail space.
Okay. That is awesome. I feel like we've unpacked a lot of information right now. Part of me is like, all right, you do it. I've probed you guys enough for one time. So let's see. Is there anything else? So two more things. So is there anything else that you can think of in your mind that is around these topics of, I mean, it sounds like this is almost down to like the where do I start episode, okay? Because everything that you have been talking about is kind of like, no, this is like start 101, right?
Right. One thing, though, is that so far this morning, much of our discussions have been centered around the commercial side. The other audience that might deserve some attention is the residential audience. Which is an entire the thought process associated with the built environment for residential, especially 1 and 2 families, quite a bit different from the thought processes. They're associated with the thought processes that we discussed thus far this morning, but you know, there are a few modifications that would be required to those thought processes. So. For our residential, especially the 1 and 2 family piece.
So do any of those pop in your head right now as far as what those modifications would be?
Yeah, the relationship between the consultant and the owner is going to be a bit different for multiple reasons. One of them is that for most part, with a 1 and 2 family kind of professional services need, oftentimes it involves just some minor, alterations to the buildings, which tend to which the construction cost itself is probably low enough that the approach to how the communication between the consultant and the owner works is going to be a little bit different because, you know, the budgets are going to be different. The risks associated with that upfront conversation probably not as great with the 1 and 2 families. So I'm being very careful how I say that because I don't want to give the impression that it couldn't be just as troublesome. It could be, but for the vast majority of these 1 and 2 family built environment activities, you find it tends not to be as complicated as with the commercial. So, as an example,
until you say I want a bedroom in my attic, but that's okay.
Yeah, exactly, Alex. Exactly. And that's kind of why I was a little bit guarded in how I said that, because you are absolutely right. I mean, in the vast majority of cases where it involved maybe wanting to remove a load-bearing wall or wanting to figure out what do I do with my basement that I noticed some what appears to be defects in my foundation wall? Or what do? I have, my floor sags, or I need to take out a bedroom here or make a change to the building. So those, for most part, tend not to be as troublesome or as risky. But, so those have their own unique requirements. So we there might be merit in discussing, in spending some time on those as well.
Okay. Do you feel like that's enough content for like a whole separate conversation as far as just residential?
I'm very sure it's
okay.
Okay. I think it's,
and I'm sure you'll agree with me, Alex.
I think it's a different conversation.
Yeah.
It's a different conversation. It's a more intimate process, and I would have a different sort of conversation around something like that.
Absolutely.
Okay. No, that's really good to know. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, maybe I don't know if if you pointed this out, but the reason I defer to Alex with that is because he spends so much time having to calm down 1 and 2 family owners who come into him for building permits and find out that this little wall they're trying to remove is probably a lot more complicated than his contractor told him previously.
Got it.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Is this some good place to put a pin in it? Or is there something else you guys feel like there's another bear we haven't poked that's still relevant to our overall conversation here about starting and people having all the motivation and not necessarily all the support necessarily? Is there anything in that zone that you want to, I guess, highlight as a big picture topic? Because I'm already seeing that this is a video where we get a lot of different ideas.
Well, the big picture topic is going to be that this is so nuanced. I mean, each project so unique and have its own specific issues, such that one can't do justice to it in 1 session or 2 sessions or 3.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're always going to find situations that warrant additional conversation. So it's going to be an ongoing discussion in my mind.
Okay, hope that makes sense. And on this platform, it allows us to actually put up visuals that we can all see and discuss them too. So we can also probably do some case studies at some point.
I believe those are. I believe that is actually going to be exceedingly useful, because what would happen is that we bring up a case study and each one of us is probably going to have a slightly different perspective on right, wrong, indifferent, or all 3.
I can see that. I definitely see that. Yeah. That's fantastic. Look, I talk the dumbest person in this room right now, which this is perfect. I love the fact that you guys are so knowledgeable, and I like the ebb and flow of this conversation. I'm already super excited about doing the next one. So how about we give you guys the rest of your Saturday back?